But now, Scooter, during the week, there was an unfortunate incident with a referee in the NHL. Referee Tim Peel made some comments referring to penalizing one of the Nashville Predators, and it went viral. Of course, the referee has lost his job. He's been reffing for like 22 years. And so I wanted some clarification and find out, the inside, what really the inner workings of being a referee. So without any further ado, let's go to the sports hotline and welcome in to the locker room, longtime referee Paul Stewart. Welcome into the locker room, Paul.
It's great to be back in Philly. I lived there in South Jersey for 5 years as a UPenn Quaker, and then later on as a Firebird.
Oh, you played on the Firebirds. Yeah, man.
The American Hockey League. Yeah, for George Pizek, one of the cheapest guys I ever met.
That was down at the old Philadelphia Convention Center, right?
That's right. And after they finished there, two things happened. Penn found out I made the NHL. They dropped the program, and then they knocked the Civic Center down. So there are no remnants of me at all left in West Philly.
Of course, you were a number 22, and of course, that's a beloved number here in Philadelphia because of Rick Tocchet. But you had a long career. You officiated over, 1,000 games, numerous Stanley Cups. And so I thought it'd be perfect to have you on to find out what's going on inside the mind of one Tim Peel. I mean, this is pretty explosive stuff. You as a former player and an official, I thought it'd be better to ask you than anybody else because you've been on both sides of the equation. So I ask you, what was he thinking? What possessed him to say that?
How many movies have we heard that line? What were you thinking? But I worked with Peel. I don't want to be a guy that jumps on a fellow that's when he's down. I think he had a brain cramp. And if he didn't, and that was his personality, then it was awfully tough to explain then how management kept him in the job for 20 plus years. The aspect of it is that why I'm not happy with him and anyone else who thinks that the perceptions of officials holding vendettas against players is a reality. It never entered my mind. My grandfather was the first American to referee in the NHL, and he won a Stanley Cup as a coach. My father was a 3-sport collegiate official, football, hockey, baseball. He worked the World Series in Omaha. He worked Army-Navy games. He worked the NCAA championships, 19 bean pots in Boston. And they have awards named after him. And my brother was a college official. My nephew's a college official. I worked many, many leagues. And I can tell you, if you listen to your mother, you'll understand what I'm going to tell you. She always said, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive." So lying can't help. The second thing is you're in front of 18,000 people. You have respect, and the real job is using common sense to sustain and maintain the respect. And I think that in the situation why I'm PO'd at Peel is because of the fact that he opened the door slightly so that all who are uninformed and uneducated and think they know about what officiating's about, now they have some fodder for their cannons to fire at us and say, "Oh yeah, we're on the take," especially now on the eve of the NHL adopting or maintaining a relationship with gambling.
We're talking with former NHL official Paul Stewart. And Stewie, I mean, the NHL officials seem to be always under more scrutiny than others. I mean, the NBA officials this year haven't been really doing well, but like you just said, you don't need any extra fodder for fans and people to think that there's something going on behind the scenes that makes the game, I don't know, unfair.
Well, I've had on my Twitter and on my blog, people say that I had vendettas against players. Right? It's a fact of life. You don't like everybody you work with. It's just a fact of life. But I never, ever went out to go after a guy or held a grudge. I used what I always call my mental Clorox. I'd bleach my mind. I'd walk onto the rink, new game, and start over. And, I was a tough guy, and I played hard. And, the referees, they didn't lay for me. And I'm talking about Van Hellemond, and I'm talking about Hood and Wally Harris and Bob Myers and outstanding guys who officiated. And when I first broke in and moved over from playing, I never heard any of that stuff, and I never saw anything. Swede Knox just passed away, 2,500 games. Guess what? He only worried about whether it was onside or offside. Everybody in Philadelphia, of course, remembers the game with Leon Stickle, the Islanders. You know what? He carries that to this day. But you have to move on. You made a mistake. End of story. And he did move on and sustain himself from 1980. And I worked with him up through like 1998. So you've got to have integrity. And anybody that wants to challenge my integrity, I'll meet you at.
He's going to drop the gloves right here, Scooter.
38th and Chestnut, where the old Smoky Joe's used to be.
That's right.
So get her on.
That's right. Stewie, it's always great to see you and listen to you. Your stories are tremendous. Do you think number one, do you think the NHL is making a statement here? And also, will the NHL OA stand behind Tim and fight Colin Campbell in the NHL on this?
Well, whether the NHL makes a statement or not, I mean, I made a gentleman's bet once on the ice with Brad May, whether the puck was in or not. And it turned out it was $20 and they fired me. And yet I said to them, well, it's going to be easy to explain firing me for $20 bet. I said, but how are you going to fire Brad May? Because it takes two to tango. And they sort of had to back off. I said, and by the way, I didn't give him $20. I made a check out to the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation for $250, which his sister suffered from that disease. And it's the number one cause of blindness in children. It was never, I'm not a gambler. I've been to the track twice in my life. I fell asleep watching races, and I had given this friend of mine a couple $100. I came back after the third or fourth race. I had been leaned up against, in Santa Anita, I leaned up against a palm tree out in the infield, and I came back at the fifth race, and he handed me $400. I said, I'm going back to sleep. So I'm not a gambler. Even Atlantic City, when we had the ECAC championships there, it's just not in my makeup. It's not in my nature. And I understand the perception. And the fact is that I never bought into that. You know, to me, it's the black and white of the sweater, the symbolism, which is right or wrong. It's fair or foul. If you make a mistake, my first game in the NHL, I disallowed the Bruins winning goal. And I had been sitting in the press box for a period and a half. Newell got hurt. Macaulay sent me in. Guess what? I did what I had to do. I made a mistake, and I went on for the next 40 minutes and did my job. And the fact is that Clarence Campbell, the former president of the NHL, used to say, if you're going to referee in the NHL, you have to have the courage of a Spitfire pilot. One plane up against 20 Germans. And you know what? I always felt that I was that type of guy. And I was also that type of guy when I played against the Flyers and when I played against the other teams that had tough teams. And it just Quebec Nordiques. I mean, I went into Boston. I fought 4 guys one night. You know what? I always say I had a hat trick plus one. Anyway.
Hey, Paul, let me ask you a question. Do you think because you were a player also, and not just the referee, that you have a different perspective on the players? Do you think like officials that maybe didn't play at a high level that are just been officials have a different view of the game?
Well, you're right. The view is that, like goaltenders, why are all goaltenders the GMs, and why are goaltenders the color commentators? Why? They saw the whole game. Right. And when I was sitting on the bench, I saw the whole game, and I could see who had courage and who didn't, who threw snow, who went in the corner reaching, who had real guts. I mean, a guy like Joe Sakic, everybody talks about Bobby Clark, but Rick McLeish had a lot of guts. And I'm intimate with all of these players. I studied the game. It was my life. And when we sat around the table at Christmas or Thanksgiving, my grandfather had refereed the Kraut line with Milt Schmidt and Dumont and Bauer. And he had refereed, Maurice Richard. And in the summertime, he was a major league umpire in the National League.
Oh, geez.
So, integrity is what it's about. And going back to what my mother said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. You lie or you make a mistake, you own it. And if you can't, own it, then you're in the wrong business. But if you make a bad call, you just say to Bill Dineen, which I had a few times, I don't think that was my strongest call, but I won't make another weak one. And I'm not going to compound it by inventing a penalty. That's even worse.
Hey, Paul, let me ask you a question. You just alluded to relationships. What type of relationships did you have with players that gained their respect? And do you think that's missing today with today's referees? It's not as personal or it's not as close.
The National League has their idea in their officiating, so they really, I don't think they rely upon a lot of the intimate and integral parts of officiating that aren't written in books. And I think that when you've played against a guy like I played against Terry O'Reilly and I played against Jack McElhargy, and now they're behind the bench coaching, and they lean over the boards and say, that was a terrible horsey call. And I say, you know what? You're just mad because I smoked you one night.
Yeah, but that's all in fun, though. I mean,
no. I mean, Pat Quinn one night threw a piece of gum and hit Driscoll off the head. I was in Montreal watching it on television. 2 nights later, I'm in Toronto, and on the way to the game, I stopped at the convenience store. I bought 10 packs of gum. I put the gum on the bench, and Ricky Lee said, "What's that for?" I said, "When Pat comes out of the dressing room, tell him it's a present from me." So before the puck drops, he calls me over. Well, you know how he was. He was blustery and chewing the gum. Right. What's this? I paid my fine. I said, Pat, there's no harm done. Everything's fine. Tonight, if I screw up, I don't want you to run out of ammunition.
Yeah. Right. Stewie, do you think
he smiled?
Right. Do you listen in that game? I mean, there was 3 penalties for each team, and the fourth penalty on Nashville was a guy shot the puck over the glass. So obviously that's a penalty. I mean, is he going to lose his pension over this?
No, he won't lose his pension. And someone asked about the NHLOA. I'm not a big fan of the union because when I had issues, they didn't stand up for me. And it was basically because I was a minority guy. I was one of the few Americans to referee, and they did set the pension up, and it's in Canadian dollars. And I got a pension worse than Gordie Howe, and I had 28 years. I'm talking about $1,000 a year. Wow. And in Canadian money, which is 30% less than US. And the union never stepped up for me. So you know what? That's fine. Guess what? I'm in the roofing business. I went and worked in Russia with Putin and Medvedev, and I ran the KHL. I'm a survivor. I've been through cancer twice. I had a brain tumor. I'm tougher than anybody that ever thought about toughness. And I'll tell you that, and I say it proudly because of the fact that challenges happen when you go for great goals. Herb Brooks said it. Great goals happen from great opportunities. And I made my way. Nobody made the NHL from Penn except me. And I didn't even play there my junior year. And you know what? Toughness is a virtue and it's a skill, but it's also something that's part of the environment. I grew up in a tough neighborhood, Dorchester. All the Wahlburgers, Mark Wahlberger and all the brothers. Guess what? Every one of them has a record, and every one of them was my brother's client. My brother was the director of probation and parole at Dorchester Court. So, it was a tough neighborhood. If you took a left after school and walked down Morton Street, they'd steal your sneakers. If you went right up river, they'd take your lunch money. So you had to fight. And to me, it's all about right and wrong in this situation with Peel. And you know what? The guy screwed up, and he's got to live with that, and it's a sad way to end your career. When I retired, I told Bettman, I'm leaving, and I'm not going to look back, and I'm not going to hold on to the door frame. I gave you my best, and I knew in my heart I couldn't do it the same way I had always done it.
Paul, listen, man, I'm glad. Listen, I'm so happy that we had you on to shed some light and give clarity to a situation that it could end up being really bad for the referees. But I knew, with your expertise and experience, you.
Well, the Russians brought me into Russia to clean up the league and get rid of all the perceptions of the referees being on the take. And I straightened that out. It took me 3 years. And the only reason I came home was because I had a brain tumor. And the fact is I missed my children. I hadn't seen them. But I'm ready, and I would go back to the NHL, and they need it. They need someone in there to be public relations, dealing with the press, dealing with the public, talking about officiating, helping to recruit, and nothing against Wacom and nothing against Campbell. But the fact is that it ain't working.
Yep.
And if something like this happens, then there's got to be a little revision. You know,
Paul, we got to cut it off because we're running out of time. But listen, man, I really appreciate it. I wish we had more time. But I
want one of those gift certificates for the Mexican restaurant. I'm coming down, baby.
Hey, listen,
perfect.
When you come down, we'll take you to Red's Jersey Mex, the best Mexican food on the island.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
All right, Paul, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and God bless, and we'll do it again.
Thank you very much, fellas. See you then.
See you, Stewie. Stay off the roof.
Yo, Philly. Yo.
There he is, Paul Stewart, right here in the locker room of the Sports Hotline.